Good morning to you, you. Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning to you, you. Good morning to you, and many more. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host today, Shantae Charles. I hope that you're having a great and wonderful day. We are live again on our YouTube channel as well as our IG. We're going to continue to bring our broadcast to the YouTube channel. So if you have any problem with the social media site, you can always go to our YouTube page, which is Church Love 333 at Life Nation. Either one of those will take you to the YouTube page. And I want to encourage you, if you don't follow us on the YouTube platform, go ahead and hit the subscribe there and hit the bell notification. So just in case anything goes wrong on the social media platform, you know that you'll be attached to that YouTube page and you can always find us there. All right. It is Wednesday. It's Relationship Wednesday. Some of America was up last night watching the very first presidential debate between Vice President Harris and former President Trump. I will be honest with you, and I will tell you that I have not really heard him speaking very much because the sound of his voice is grating to me. Um, so I have mainly, when he speaks or anything like that, I've mainly been reading articles or I'll read the transcript of something. But last night I got a chance to actually listen to him for 90 minutes, a little bit over 90 minutes with the commercials and everything inside of the broadcast. And because this is Relationship Wednesday, I want to start out by pointing out that one of our candidates has spent their career building relationships with people, building partnerships, having people that will vouch for them in their political career, while the other candidate has spent his time burning bridges, burning relationships, firing people. And so even the people who worked under him are coming out against him. I think that says a lot about the two candidates that are before us. If you want to see what my commentary was and what other commentary that people were saying that I've kind of highlighted, I put up some fact checking articles. I put up the transcript from the election, things that people might be looking for today. You can find those things on our Facebook page, Black Table Talk. I think maybe the first 5 to 7 posts on our page today all have to do with the election. So if you want to go over there and take a look and join the conversation that people are having about the election from last night, feel free to do that. Just make sure you join and that you have some civil discourse going on because uh, we don't deal with or we don't have a high tolerance for people that just start windmilling into the comment section, threatening people, being rude, being disrespectful. None of that is necessary. And so it doesn't matter who your candidate is. We have people that are in the conversation that are voting for number 45, and we have the majority of people who are voting for Kamala Harris. We have some people that are choosing to go the third party route. My responsibility is to just facilitate a conversation. And as long as you are respectful in your dialogue, you're stating your points about why you're choosing a certain candidate, I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I'm just going to say I'm not voting for the convicted felon. That's it. All right. So, moving into our topic for today, As I said last week, we have been reading Set Boundaries, Find Peace, and Drama Free. Today, we're only going to jump into Set Boundaries, Find Peace today. And the chapter is Identify and Communicate Your Boundaries. Identify and communicate your boundaries. I don't know if you have ever felt or ever found yourself in a position where it's like people are not understanding what your boundaries are. But, you know, we will take a look at that and see what our author today has in mind when it comes to boundaries. All right. Identify and communicate your boundaries. You don't have to be boundaryless to be loved. For as long as Eric could remember, and this is a scenario she's giving, for as long as Eric could remember, his father, Paul, was an alcoholic. Everyone else in their family made excuses for the drinking. Eric's mother would say, "You know he doesn't mean it," even keeping alcohol in the house for Paul despite the fact that she rarely drank herself. At family gatherings, everyone joined him in the drinking, even though his behavior was always sloppy, loud, and embarrassing. But Eric grew tired of minimizing his father's addiction, so he came to me wanting to learn how to address the issue. Eric told me about failed rehab attempts, mostly prompted by Paul's work challenges. His dad would get out of rehab and stay sober for a few weeks, but sooner or later he would start to drink again. Eric felt guilty because in his late teens and early 20s, he often shared a few beers with his dad. At 25, however, Eric was no longer interested in drinking with him because his father always took it too far. Good morning to those of you coming in. In our first few sessions together, Eric described what it was like to be the child of an alcoholic. Now, I know that myself. My mother has a serious problem with alcoholism. She has, I'll probably say, starting maybe in her early 20s. Um, I remember her beginning to drink very heavily around the time I was maybe 11, 12. Um, but I do know that part of her issue was tied to some trauma that happened um, in our family and in her life, in her marital life, and then domestic violence. So I do know some of the source of her alcoholism. So Eric described what it was like to be the child of an alcoholic. He talked about how his home life was very scary and unpredictable. Yes. When Paul was drunk, he became verbally aggressive. Yes, I can attest to that. So Eric never knew what to expect when his dad came home from work. He tried to stay out of his father's way because he'd seen his older brother try to stand up to Paul, which resulted in several shouting matches. Now, ours didn't result in several shouting matches. Mine resulted in physical abuse. And then my parent waking up the next day and not recognizing or not remembering any of the things that they had done the night before, which can be traumatizing because you have a parent that's acting out of character, out of bounds with you, abusing you, and then they don't remember what they've done. Yeah, it's not a good feeling. As a child, Eric once asked his father, "Why do you drink so much?" "Alcohol is my friend," was Paul's answer. When I asked Eric about his current relationship with his father, he said their discussions were always all about Paul. Eric tried to make sure his dad was keeping himself busy and would ask if Paul had eaten anything. Paul frequently repeated himself, telling the same stories over and over. Good morning to those coming in. Occasionally, Paul would call his son in a rage and become verbally abusive. Eric never understood what prompted these rage-filled moments. As his mother continued to make excuses for her husband, Eric's relationship with her also deteriorated. He couldn't confide in her because she always took Paul's side. Trying to help his father was weighing on Eric. One thing Eric hadn't tried in an effort to improve his relationship with his parents was to begin to set boundaries with them. How many of you have tried to set boundaries with people, but you found it to be difficult? He believed he'd set them by telling his mother, I don't like dad's drinking, and occasionally ignoring his father's phone calls. But I gently explained to Eric that these were only passive aggressive attempts to set a boundary. When we passively aggressively set boundaries, we might say something indirectly to the other person, or we might speak to someone who isn't in a position to resolve the issue. I had to learn this in my own life. I had to stop telling people things that were not in a position to resolve an issue and take the issue to the person that could actually resolve it. Now, sometimes this required me going to a counselor and saying, hey, I have this scenario. Can you give me some strategies around resolving it? But I couldn't keep avoiding the person or the issue forever. Eric was indirect with his father about his expectations. He assumed Paul would just catch the hint, but his father remained clueless. Instead of being direct with his dad, Eric tried for so long to ignore his own concerns and act like everything was normal. Well, what happens when you continue to ignore your own concerns? You start to sometimes build up resentment towards that person because you feel like you can't really address what they're doing, but their behavior is continuing on and on and on. In this way, Eric's behavior was passive aggressive. He acted frustrated without clearly communicating his desires to his father. Now, let's look at 4 ways to unsuccessfully communicate a boundary. 4 ways to unsuccessfully communicate a boundary. And see if you can find yourself in here. I know I probably can. I know I can because I haven't always communicated a boundary well. So let's look at the first one. Passive. When someone is passive, they think something like this. I'm uncomfortable sharing my needs, therefore I will keep them to myself. Being passive is denying your own needs, ignoring them to allow others to be comfortable while they make you uncomfortable. People who communicate passively are afraid of how others will perceive their needs. Maybe the other person will abandon them, so they do nothing to get their own needs met. Other examples of passiveness is having an issue with someone but not saying anything, which often happens in corporate America, in the workplace, more often than not. Allowing people to do and say things with which you disagree. Being afraid to simply say, I disagree. I hear you, I hear what you're saying, but I disagree with what you're saying. And ignoring things that are triggering for you. Some of us have triggers that we like to keep to ourselves because sometimes we feel like if that person knows what my trigger is, they are more likely to use that thing against me. However, there does come a point when you have to say, I'm really bothered by that behavior. I'm really bothered by that action. I'm really bothered when you use that word around me. There's a few words that I don't use in my vocabulary that when I hear other people use them and when I hear that they're saying, oh, this is how I always talk or this is what I always use frequently. So if you're around me, you're going to have to get used to me saying these things. That lets me know I don't want to be around you, not in a regular setting. One of those is the N word. I don't want to be around people who love the N word, whether it's in casual gesture or casual addressing of a friendship, or whether it's something they feel just comfortable using, it comes out their mouth all the time. That's not somebody I'm really interested in having a social connection with. Why? Because I don't use that word. I don't use it in jest. I don't use it as entertainment. I don't use it as a term of endearment. So that would be a place where I would set a boundary. And I would say, listen, I get that you're okay with using that word, but for me, the word does not have any connotation connected to it in a positive way. So when you address me or when you talk to me, It's not what's up my N word. It's not what's up my B. Those aren't words I add to my vocabulary when I'm speaking to people. And sometimes you just have to be honest about that. You have to let people know. Those aren't words that I add to my vocabulary in addressing people. Now, they have two choices, right? They can either continue to use that language with you, or they can respect the boundary that you're setting. Here's another way to unsuccessfully communicate a boundary: aggressive. When someone is aggressive, they might say or imply the following: I need you to see how you make me feel. Aggressive communication is attacking another person with harsh, pushy, or demanding words and behaviors instead of stating what we want. Aggressiveness demands, I want you to see how upset you made me. When people are aggressive, they aren't necessarily considerate of how their behaviors make others feel. Intimidating people via behavior and verbal insults or assaults is offensive. Other examples of aggression: demeaning other people to make your point, using yelling, name calling, and cursing as tactics to convey your opinion, using a person's past in order to shame them, being loud and wrong, making up facts to pretend to be right, confronting people to pick a fight, using cynical humor to ridicule, such as, you're fat. You know I'm just joking. Stop being so sensitive. In contrast to Eric, his brother was aggressive toward their father. He made open reference to Paul being a drunk. As a kid, he stood up to his father by yelling back. As an adult, he started shouting matches with his father. Bringing up old stories was another way that Eric's brother demeaned their father. Whenever Eric tried to talk to his brother about the aggressiveness, the brother would say, I get it from dad. As Paul was aging, however, he wasn't as intimidating. Only occasionally would he try to shame his sons. The third way is passive aggressive. When someone is passive aggressive, they think something like this: I will just act out how I am feeling, but I will deny how I feel. Sometimes when people act in a passive aggressive manner, they do so unconsciously. We don't always understand the reasons behind our behavior. In seeing clients for more than a decade, passive aggressiveness is the number one way we communicate our feelings and needs. When people describe their passive aggressive behavior, I say to them, so you haven't communicated your need, but you've acted it out? The problem is that people cannot guess our needs based on our actions. And sometimes they can't guess our needs even based on our body language. They may not know what our behavior means or even notice that we're trying to communicate something new. Our desires simply have to be verbalized. Passive aggressiveness is a way we resist directly setting boundaries. To avoid confrontation, we hope the other person will figure out what they're doing wrong and self-correct their behaviors through our indirect actions. But we don't get what we want by pretending to be unbothered and avoiding the straightforward expression of our needs. Being indirect is counterproductive because our needs go unmet. This only makes us more frustrated and overwhelmed in our interactions with others. Other ways that you might be exhibiting passive aggressiveness and not realize it: appearing upset but refusing to admit that you're upset. When someone says, are you okay? And you say, no, I'm good. I'm fine. I'm fine. Everything's okay. And inside there is a raging fireball of anger. That is passive aggressive behavior. Making verbal attacks not related to the current situation. If you find yourself bringing up something else about the person rather than the true issue that you have with them, that is passive aggressive behavior. Being moody for no known reason, often because there's some unresolved issue that you have with the person and you're choosing not to share it. Bringing up issues from the past. Keeping a record of wrongs. Has nothing to do, again, with the matter at hand, but you just have a whole litany of things that you're keeping track of. engaging in problem-focused complaining, gossiping about things you could fix, but you have no intention of addressing it. Eric, this particular son, was mostly passive aggressive. He lamented to his mother about his father's drinking, but other than the question he asked as a child, he never said anything directly to his dad about the problem. Eric ignored his father's calls sometimes, but his dad had no way of knowing that he was ignoring his calls because he didn't want to deal with him because of the alcoholism. It would be easy for Paul to assume that Eric was just simply too busy to take his calls. Eric thought that he had set boundaries around his father, but he really had not. He was just using passive aggressive behavior. And fourthly, the way to not deal with people in boundary setting, manipulation. Paul and anyone else, when someone uses manipulation, they do or say things they hope will cause the other person to feel guilty and do what the manipulator wants. Now, it's sadly in our society, most people are using manipulation. They're not being straightforward. They're not coming out with what it is they want, they need, or desire. A lot of people step into manipulation thinking that, oh, I'm being smart, I'm being clever. No, you're being manipulative. Here's some examples. I will indirectly convince you to do what I want without telling you what I want. I notice guilting when I hear words like convince them to, make them do, persuade them to. It's true that manipulating people can sometimes bring results. Many adults and children use manipulation as a way to get their needs met, pleading until they convince the other person to give in. However, here's a way to tell the difference between manipulation and negotiation or making a deal. When making a deal, even if unfair, each party is aware of what they've agreed to. For children, making a deal might sound like, if I have a good day in school, will you give me a treat when I get home? For adults, it might sound like, if I watch an action movie with you, will you watch a romantic comedy with me? That's a negotiation. The manipulated person, however, often doesn't know that they're being taken advantage of. Being manipulated feels confusing because the manipulator is trying to make the other party feel bad. Therefore, we tend to give in to the things we wouldn't ordinarily agree to. Examples of manipulation. Making an issue you have with a person seems like it's an issue they have with you, also known as gaslighting. Asking for help at the last minute and informing you that they have no other options. That's manipulation. Telling a story that's intended to evoke pity, to soften a person's heart, and then make an ask. That's manipulation. People do it all the time, though. Leaving out critical parts of a story to persuade you to support them and not the other thing or the other person. That's manipulation. Withholding affection to get you to feel bad or change your behavior. People in relationships, that's manipulation. Using your relationship with a person as a reason that they should do certain things. For example, wives should cook, or you should see your mother every day. She's your mother, he's your dad. Not realizing or recognizing the true issues in a person's relationship. That's manipulation. Paul manipulated his wife by talking about how stressful it was for him at work and how drinking was the only way he could unwind. When Eric spoke to his mother about Paul's drinking, she'd say, "It's so hard for him. Work is tough and he's sensitive." She made excuses for Paul because she pitied him. She had been manipulated into accepting his alcohol problem. So, what is the way? How can we deal with somebody and communicate our boundaries in a healthy way? Assertiveness is the way. I love the word assertive. Number one, because I like to be assertive. Now, sometimes my assertiveness gets read as boldness. Sometimes people read it as intimidating. I have people say, "Oh, you're intimidating me." I'm not. I'm just making it very clear what I believe and what I don't believe. And unfortunately, because we live in a society that values unclear communication, anybody who has clear communication is automatically seen as aggressive. When someone is assertive, they will think something like this: I know what my needs are, and I will communicate them to you. Now, you have a choice to fulfill those needs, or you have a choice to say, no, I don't want to fulfill those needs. The healthiest way to communicate your boundaries is to be assertive. In contrast to all the other forms of ineffective communication, assertiveness is how you clearly and directly state your needs. Now, sometimes when you're not sure, and I know this has been for me too, when you're not sure how a person is going to receive your direct communication, sometimes you can be a little anxious, you can be a little nervous, right? But I have learned to communicate my needs and do it even if my voice shakes. Do it even if my knees are knocking together. Do it even if my palms are sweating. All right? I still do it. And then I say, I have to be good with the outcome because I know that I have honestly communicated what it is that I need. Assertiveness involves communicating your feelings openly and without attacking others. It isn't demanding. Instead, it's a way of commanding that people hear you. Here are some examples of assertiveness: saying no to anything you don't want to do. Now, most of the people on my IG already know this, but I'm going to challenge you. I spent 1 year after I came out of a place of prayer and meditation. I was challenging myself to spend 365 days, a whole year, of saying no and learning to tell people no. Because I had gotten into the place of passive aggressiveness, I had gotten into a place of people pleasing, I had gotten into a place of just saying yes to everything people asked me to do because I was a helper. I simply just wanted to help people. But at the end of the day, all of that saying yes was causing issues in my own life. It was causing me to have myself so full of doing things for other people that I was actually affecting doing things that I need to be doing for myself. It had my schedule so tight and so cramped that I felt like I couldn't find rest for myself or I couldn't slow down for myself. So I challenged myself to a year of saying no. Now, was this an easy thing to do? Absolutely not. Because people who were so used to me saying yes to anything they asked of me all of a sudden got upset. Why? Because I had changed the boundaries on the relationship. I had decided that I was going to put some boundaries in place. And so saying no to anything I didn't want to do and fighting off the guilt of telling people no and realizing that, okay, when I tell this person no, I don't know how they're going to react. And the other piece is I could see the way that people were reacting and realize that some of my friendships, some of my connections were only friendships and connections because I never told the person no. I always said yes. And so that was a harsh reality to take in, that some people were only connected because they felt like they could just come to me and take and take and take and take and take and take and receive and never have to put any investment into the relationship. It was a hard awareness, but I came to it. All right. So saying no to anything you don't want to do. Number two, telling people how you feel as a result of their behavior. Sometimes we let behavior go on in front of us and we don't want to let that person know how we feel about their behavior. But sometimes that could be what that person needs to hear in order to change, because sometimes no one in their circle, no one in their friend circle, no one in their family circle has actually come out and expressed to them how their behavior makes them feel. All right. And the third one, sharing your honest thoughts about your experiences. Chuck P, most of them are at home, probably meditating somewhere. One of my friends actually said that same thing. He said, "Why can't I find a beautiful natural black queen like you? Where y'all be? At home." At home. The streets are crazy. And you know what my friend said? Well, guess what? He said, "I'm buying some flowers and I'm going to start knocking on doors." He said, "I'm going to have to start going door to door." All right. More examples of assertiveness. Responding in the moment. This is a really good one. One of the best bosses, I don't necessarily want to call her a boss, but one of the best directors that I've ever been under said this to me, and I've kind of adapted it as one of my own things. She said, "Anything that bothers you for more than 5 minutes, you should probably address it, especially if it's something happening in your professional life or your workplace life. Try to respond in the moment. Try not to let things sit and simmer, because all it's going to do is create stories in your mind that might not mirror what actually happened." So I had to get better at responding to things in the moment and when those things occurred, and not letting them sit and not letting them fester. Here's another one. Instead of talking to a third party, talking directly to the person you have issues with. A lot of the beef that we see on social media starts by what? It starts by people not talking to the person directly, but they're going to social media with their issue. They're going to social media with their problem. And then they're getting input from thousands of people about a situation they should have just addressed with the initial person. Lastly, making your expectations clear up front instead of assuming people will figure them out. What are the clear upfront expectations? Don't assume. Most of us know the phrase about assuming, right? When you assume, it makes a blank out of you and me. So, working on boundaries means you have to work on your ability to be assertive. You have to share your boundaries without being passive, without being manipulative, without being aggressive, or without being passive aggressive. If you want to set healthy boundaries, you must do so assertively. All right? Next time we come back, we're going to talk about how to successfully communicate a boundary, how to do that successfully. Today, we just wanted to look at the ways not to do it, but next time, that's what we'll cover. If you're watching me by YouTube, I want to thank you for your time and attention. We're going to head back over to Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram at Daring Dialogues. That's where we're going to have part 2, and you'll be allowed to come onto the screen and share in a conversation. All right? Again, the book is Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Dr. Nedra Glover Tawwab. I hope that you enjoyed today's segment. Tomorrow, we're going to be back with Thinking Thursday, Theology Thursday, and we'll be looking at the concept of forgiveness. Dr. Maisha Cherry has some wonderful things to share with us about forgiveness, what we get wrong, and how we can do better. Thank you all for your time and attention. Take care, be well, and most importantly, be light. All right. If